Hi, in this video we'll be talking about measures of dispersion or variability group data. In particular, we'll be measuring the range R, the variance sigma squared, the standard deviation, and the coefficient of variation. So this is our group data with the indicated class interval and frequency. So to start, let's compute for the range R. By definition, this is simply the difference of the highest value and the lowest value. So in our group data, the highest value is the upper limit of the last class interval, and the lowest value is the lower limit of the first class interval. To compute for that, this is simply equals the value of 53 minus 12, and that is equal to 41. To compute for the variance, we'll be needing this formula: summation of the product of the frequency and the square of the difference of the midpoint and the mean divided by the summation of the frequency. So to do this, we'll be needing to complete the column for the midpoint, that is the x, so it's equal to the average of the lower limit and the upper limit of each class interval. So this is simply the average equals average, open parenthesis, of these two values, press enter, and the midpoint is 15. We simply copy or apply the same formula, so our column for the midpoint is now completed. To compute for the mean, we need to take the quotient of the summation of the product of the frequency and the midpoint and the summation of the frequency. So we need the column for fx, or simply the product of the frequency and the midpoint. So this is simply equals the frequency multiplied to the midpoint, and that is 120 for the first class interval. We copy or apply the same formula for the rest of the class interval. And we also take the summation. So this is simply equals SUM, open parenthesis, and we highlight these 6 values for the product of the frequency and the midpoint, and that is 779. So let's go ahead and compute for the mean. That is mu equals the summation of fx divided by the summation of f. So that is 779 divided by 30. That's equal to 25.97 in 2 decimal place. So now let's proceed to our variance sigma squared. We need to have this column for the product of the frequency and the square of the difference of the midpoint and the mean, so that this is what we are aftering, the summation of this column. However, we need to start with the simplest value inside the parenthesis. That is the difference of the midpoint and the mean. So this is simply equals the midpoint minus our mean, 25.97. That is equal to negative 10.97. We can simply copy this formula. However, we need to lock the value 25.97 located in the cell M3. So we simply place a $sign before letter M and a $sign before number 3. Press enter, and we are now ready to copy the formula. Simply drag it down, and the whole column is now completed. We now take the product of these 2 columns, the frequency and the difference of the midpoint and the mean. So that is equals the frequency multiplied to the product or to the difference of the midpoint and the mean. Press enter, and you have a negative 87.73. We copy the formula, simply drag the cell, and there you go, it's also completed. For the final column, we need a product of these 2 columns, so it will actually yield the product of the frequency and the square of the difference of the midpoint and the mean. So this is now equals this column multiplied to this column. Press enter, and you have a value of 962.14 for the first class interval. Copy the formula or simply drag, and the summation of this column would be equals SUM, open parenthesis, and highlight these 6 values press enter, and you have a value of 2418.97. Now the variance is now equals the summation of this value divided by the summation of f, 30, that's 30. That is now equal to 80.63. That is now our variance. For the standard deviation, we simply take the square root of the variance. So this is equals SQRT open parenthesis, the value of the variance, which is 80.63. Press enter and you have 8.98. For the last measure of dispersion, the coefficient of variation, this is equals the standard deviation divided by the mean. Enter, and you have a value of 34.58%. Normally, the value that will appear would be a decimal value. So you have to convert this to percentage by simply multiplying 100%. In Microsoft Excel, simply click the percentage icon. So it becomes 35%, or in 2 decimal place, this is 34.58%. So there you go. We have the measures of dispersion, the range, the variance, the standard deviation, and the coefficient of variation.